How do you intentionally cultivate joy in your life?
I think there are micro moments that bring me joy every day, and they are
Hey everyone. Today I have a special guest. I want you to meet Natalie Siston. She's a small town girl with big leadership wisdom. So from the bright lights of Silicon Valley to the boardrooms of Fortune 100 companies, Natalie Siston has built a powerhouse career. But her greatest leadership lessons? Those came from growing up in Republic, Ohio, a town of just 600 people. Her journey from a 10-year-old winning a purple ribbon at the Ohio State Fair, her proudest public speaking moment to date, to becoming a best-selling author and keynote speaker is proof that our most authentic selves hold the key to success. In her book, Let Her Out, Reclaim Who You Have Always Been, Natalie helps you rediscover the joy, confidence, and leadership potential that you have inside you all along. Natalie is a speaker, a coach, a mentor, and a dedicated mom who finds just as much joy cheering on her daughters at dance, soccer, and softball as she does inspiring you to reclaim your power. So let's dive into her story, her wisdom, and how we can all embrace our truest, most joyful selves. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Oh my goodness, that was gorgeous and so fun to listen to, Sandy. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Absolutely. I'd love to get started, Natalie, with talking about your small town roots. I love this element of your life story. You credit your small town upbringing with shaping your leadership skills. So, what are some of those early lessons and how do they still guide you today?
Yeah, this is such a good question that I get asked very frequently because so many people don't have that small town experience, so they can't relate. I mean, it's often when I tell people I grew up in a town of 600 people, like, oh my gosh, that's how many people went to my high school or like, lived in my apartment building or whatnot. So when you grow up in a small town, I think what I learned most is you can't hide. And so there are two approaches that I saw people take in that is that they tried to hide and then inevitably would get caught. I'm thinking of teenagers doing things they shouldn't be doing. Or you lean into the fact that everybody knows everybody and everybody's business, and you allow that to help you create a supportive environment. That's the top lesson I've taken from that small town, Sandy. And I think it's really where our society breaks down today. In my work with clients last year, one of the top themes I walked away with is people are so afraid to ask for help. And when you grow up in a town of 600 people, you have to know to ask for help, or help has arrived before you even ask for it because of the virtual telephone that happens in that environment. So I think for me, it's been incredibly important just to know that it's great to know people. And I'm always one to want to triple click into somebody to really understand who they are, what motivates them, because I was able to do that growing up because you spent so much time with the same people, the same players. And that's the results that I like to make it everywhere I go today feel that way.
Yeah. Natalie, as you share that element of your experience in a small town, the word that's coming up for me that's important to both you and I is that word community. I'm getting the sense that when you grow up in a small town, you get this natural community, which is, as you said, for many people missing in their lives, potentially growing up or even now, in that sense of maybe security and belonging.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things I've struggled with in my adulthood since moving from that small town. So I left when I was 18 to go to college at the second biggest college in the country, or maybe it was the first. It depends. I went to Ohio State and I never looked back, right? I obviously I go home to visit, but I've never gone back to the small town. And what I've experienced a lot in my young adulthood and motherhood and being an entrepreneur is loneliness because there isn't the natural built-in community. Because, quite frankly, I don't know my neighbors, which is sad to me. I'm the one who wants to have people over and talk, and it just by the time you get to the end of your work day, the end of your work week, sometimes you just don't have the energy to do that. Or quite frankly, I think people don't know how to do that. Like, how do I actually go up and approach a stranger and make a friendship? So I think that's something if we can overcome that in our adulthood, Sandy, I think we would be living in a completely different world. I think we have people walking around in a haze of loneliness and disconnection. And it's hard to say those things out loud. And for a lot of people, they don't even articulate that's what's wrong. And so for
Mhm.
me, when I was able to pinpoint that, it allowed me to then, take the appropriate action to get over it. And also recognize that it's not going to go away from me. I think that's kind of one of the underlying emotions that I will continue to work through and with the rest of my life.
Wow. Yeah, that recognition I think is really important because what's coming up for me as you said that is that as human beings, it's natural. It's part of our instinct to want a sense of belonging, a sense of safety. And as you're saying, when you go through life and you don't acknowledge that or look for those places where you feel safe, you kind of put yourself on guard unconsciously, don't you? You kind of put on a facade or you put on the armor to protect yourself because you don't know whether you belong or if you're safe. Am I accurate in hearing some of that?
Completely accurate. And you and I both do enough work in mental fitness and energy coaching that energy, attracts and detracts. And so when people sense the armor, when they feel the closed offness, they're not going to lean into that. And the opposite's true. If you're open and inviting, people gravitate toward that. So I think we're living in a world where probably 75% of people are walking around in armor. And I don't know, maybe my ratio is off, Sandy. I've not done a scientific study on this. And then the other 25% is probably exhausted because they're the one that's always extending the olive branch.
Sure. And what you're saying is that, and I just want to acknowledge that, we're only about 5 years out now from a major pandemic where we had this very traumatic collective experience, and really didn't, a lot of people really just kind of went about their regular day to day when we were allowed to. And so, and that energy transference, I think also, if it's just kind of contagious in many ways. So,
Mhm.
I think this is a great segue into talking about your book because here we are talking about being closed off and armored, and your book is saying, let her out. That title is so powerful. What does let her out mean to you, and what inspired you to write this book?
Let her out means letting that armor down. It means releasing all of the barriers, all of the weight that has slowly built up over the course of our lives. I was inspired to write the book through rejection. I found all of the journals and diaries I've kept since I was 8 years old, right before I turned 40, and I built that into a TEDx proposal. And I thought this is my stage. I had been applying, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is beautiful for a TEDx women's stage, and it got rejected. So I then turned it into a keynote, and I had stages lined up for the spring of 2020 to get those on, and all of those stages shut down because of COVID. So I was stuck again of what do I do with this idea? And I had fortunately come across someone who was a book coach, and I talked to her about this idea, and she said, "Well, send me the outline, send me the thoughts." And so from there, I had a book written in 6 months, mostly because I had been writing it already for 32 years
Mm.
because I reread all of the journals and diaries, and that was a painful experience, Sandy. I mean, there was definitely more pain than joy, but I what I tried to do is really highlight those moments of joy to figure out who was she in those moments.
Mm.
And so that's what I'm inviting everybody to do as they read the book and go through the experience is whatever method they want to go find who their most joyful self was. For some people, it's very easy for them to go back to their childhood and think about that. And for other people, it's very difficult because of traumatic experiences and upbringing. So I definitely guide people through the way that works for them to figure out how do I spotlight periods in my life where I was completely joyful and fully myself, and how do I bring her back? And that's the whole idea of let her out. And so I walk the readers through a 4-step framework where you remember her, you reconnect to her, you recognize and remove the barriers to her. We've already talked about one of my biggest ones today, which was disconnection and loneliness. And then from there, you can let her out. And you've done a beautiful job on your first podcast talking about action planning. And I think that anyone who reads this book can also jump right to your action planning activities to help them continuing to get into the let her out mode. So that's the very brief synopsis of why I wrote the book and what it's doing in the world. And I enjoyed so much the process. You and I have worked together quite a long time in some ways. But what you might not see is I just love process orientation. I'm a geek at heart. And so I just love the entire methodology and how do you do this and what's the next step. So that was really fun for me, but also engaging the readers both before, during, and now that I've been 5 years as a published author has been so cool just to see that this message is fairly timeless and probably will become more and more profound as time goes on because we let the fast pace of what's crossing our feeds tell us who we should be. When what I want to invite people to do is always just remember who you really are and honor that.
Wow, yeah, and for our listeners out there, Natalie and I are on our both unique coach journeys, but we also have worked together and work together currently at Positive Intelligence. And so much of what we focus on is that resilience and the mental fitness piece. How does that play in, Natalie, to being authentic to oneself?
It's hand in glove, quite frankly. I thought really carefully about how do I recommend tools and approaches and everybody who reads this book is already probably pretty busy and full, and so I wanted to bring it back to the basics of how do I actually honor who I am and work through these barriers. Because that's the work of our lives, Sandy. We refer to them as saboteurs, limiting beliefs, gremlins, like all the words.
Yeah.
That's what they are. Sometimes they're like tangible barriers, like I don't have enough money or resources to do the thing I want to do. Most of the time, though, they're these intangible, heady type of voices just holding us down. And so what I wanted to do is be very clear with people about how they can work forward. And it's really, a few things. So one is practicing your self command, which is what we teach in positive intelligence. And I refer people directly to the work of Shirzad Shamin in that regard. We don't need to reinvent any wheels there, but it's as simple as taking 3 deep breaths. That's after doing this work for 5 years, Sandy, that's how I've bottom lined it. 3 deep breaths. When I feel that imposter syndrome pop up, when I feel the barrier getting in my way, I take 3 deep breaths. And then I highly recommend people do reflection through writing. Getting out what's in your head will just clear things up so much. And then I think it's really important for people to work with and seek support from helping professionals, whether that's a coach like you and I who helps them look forward, or oftentimes this work, will have people seek out a therapist where they say, you know what, I didn't realize what I needed to unpack, and I want to talk through with someone with that so it stops holding me back. So it's not in a matter of like all these bad things, but more, wow, I just didn't realize how much there was to uncover. And there are helping professionals who that's their livelihood of helping people piece together what happened so they can move forward even more effectively.
Yeah, and I think slowly but surely our society is starting to normalize this, self reclaiming journey, right? Of accessing help. You don't need to do it by yourself. And but along those lines, many people still feel like they've lost those parts of themselves along the way, especially women. I think they get lost in their various identities and then um, kind of cling to those and lose their sense of true self. What would you recommend as that first step in reconnecting with who we've always been?
Two steps. One is finding the proof of who she was then. And I have that proof in my form of my journals, like reading the day that I declared I wanted to be the president of the United States, right? And I don't know, I wrote that down when I was 10 or 12 or something, but just reading that as a fully grown woman was like, dang, that girl was ambitious, and how much have I let that ambition dim over the course of life as responsibilities pile up, as the world gets, more complex, that type of thing. So I think it's finding the evidence. So if you have a stack of journals and diaries, go dive in. Take care of yourself in the process. Or for a lot of people, it's pictures. It's simply finding that photo album from childhood and saying, "Oh my gosh, wow, I see her in this. I like see that glint in her eye, that dimple in her cheek, that spunk in her face, like, woo, woo, where's she gone?" So so what I really want people to do is feel that in their body, and that's the difference to me between remembering and reconnecting. Remembering is like, "Oh yeah, remember the time that we blah blah the thing," whereas reconnecting is like, "Oh, I feel her. I feel her." And so then, Sandy, when we start to feel that, we can then take the action on that by saying, okay, the activities that I did to bring me that joy, the people I spent time with, this where I had my headspace was like this, and go back and get into that. So for a lot of people, and to your point, especially women, but this has resonated equally well with men, I'll have to say. And I present it both as read it as an ally or read it as him, to see where he's also lost his way. Um, but with that piece, it's really saying, you know what? I felt most alive when I was doing art, when I was doing music, when I was in nature.
Mm,
And I don't give myself time to do any of that in my busy, busy adult life. And you and I both know it might only take 5 minutes of listening to music or perhaps playing music or singing music or dancing to really light up what we call the sage part of our brain, where I say she lives. That's where she lives. Or just spending 5 minutes in nature, just taking in the beauty of what is around us and just realizing that, whew, I'm a tiny speck on this big earth and that's a miracle. So it's really getting back in the bones of her or him and then taking that action to bring us that spark of joy. And it's
mhm.
often not that hard and it doesn't take that much time. I think that's the big fallacy in our life. We claim we're so busy, yet we're doom scrolling for hours upon hours. Like put down the device, just put it down and go outside. Put on some music, sing a little bit, take a walk. Yeah.
I know. I think for, our generation, we still continue to live in this straddle, right? We know what life was before the devices and post. And so we have, I feel like, somewhat of a chance, but I always am concerned. Also, Natalie, what I'm taking away from what you just shared is the power of perspective, right? To be able to kind of go back to our younger self and connect with that true essence of who we came into this world being before we had all the layers of stories and, just influences on ourselves to shape us going forward. And um, I admit I have a stack of journals that I kind of opened once and then closed. It was just like you said, it felt a little bit too painful and too vulnerable. Maybe I wasn't in the right space for it, but I will try that again. But I do have a picture of myself, a younger picture of myself. I think I'm about 4 or 5 in this picture, and I love it so much because it's a picture of me when we first came to this country and I didn't speak the language. I wasn't used to the food and, this big, huge country that I wasn't, ready for. It was a choice that wasn't of my own, but, here I am sitting in daycare, making my thing and just seeing her and what she was able to do in that, with all that she had, that strength. It just empowers me when I'm like, I can't do this one task that's taken me like 5 days that I'm avoiding. Like, you can do it. Um, so I want to shift a little bit to this role of leadership or change agents in the world. And, so many of us focus on our professional lives and we feel, maybe I'm wrong, but oftentimes I hear that, there is this choice between joy and ambition, right? It has
Mm.
to be one or the other. How would you look at that and say, can you reclaim both? Can you work one alongside the other?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a real strong power of the word and. I can be joyful and ambitious. I can be caring mother and be a boss. I can be a community leader and, provide at home. Like, I think there's just a big power of the and we all get caught up in identity probably way too much. And I think you're absolutely right. I have been guilty. I still feel like I'm guilty of, over indexing on value from career and profession. And quite frankly, I do it now because I'm so proud of what I've done. I mean, this is the other part of growing up in a small town is that you don't know what you don't know. And so I didn't know what it would be like to work at a big company. I had no idea that I would ever live and work in California. Like I didn't see that stuff. And so now every step I take forward, I'm like, holy cow, I did that. And what I'm trying to move away from is I'm just a small town girl or, oh, like little old me did this. Like, no, no, like she was always big for her britches. She was always ambitious. She was always spunky. She was always in there. And now she just has a different world to live in and put that out there. And so I think it's really important for everyone to just figure out where in the heck am I dimming myself? We do it for the sake of other people. We do it because, oh gosh, that one time when I was in fourth grade, I was told I bragged. And from that moment forward, it's like, ooh, can't be too bright, can't shine too bright. And no, like, darn it, brag on yourself. People are not paying attention to you that much. So go ahead and brag on yourself, especially for those of us who are out in the world, either growing our own or growing small businesses. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the change we're making in the world to not shrink down and not let that, oh, I can't be this and this. Like, yes, you can.
Yes, you can. Can be joyous and ambitious. Look at that. And
Exactly. You
yeah,
totally can.
and what I'm taking away from what you just shared is the power of the story, right? The power of the story that you tell yourself, the power of the story that you tell others. Like you have full reign to write your own story.
You totally do. And I think that's the big reason why I wrote that book is I wanted to get those stories out into the world. I think we first write a book for ourselves. I
Yeah.
needed to write that for me to release all of the ideas and the hope and the possibility and the pain so that I could be a fuller version of myself. And now it's the gift in the world is it's helping a lot of other people do the same thing.
Beautiful. So there's another part of you, Natalie, that I want to share with our audiences, and that is your public speaking prowess. So behind the scenes, we always refer to Natalie as Ninja Nat, and she is amazing on the stage. You've been speaking professionally now for over 15 years. What advice would you give to anyone who wants to use their voice more confidently?
I say if there's anything you want to do, you just have to go do it. And for me, that's professional speaking, and I just had to go do it. And it was so I've been speaking since I was a little girl. You said that in my introduction. I grew up in the 4-H program, which is a typically it's thought of as a youth agricultural leadership program. I did not grow up on a farm, despite being from a 600 person town. So the main skill I developed in 4-H was public speaking. So I've carried that thread with me throughout my whole life. Every job I've ever had, if the stage wasn't part of the job, I made it part of the job. And so I would say to people who are in full time jobs who love to speak, find opportunities to speak in that job, whether it's through leading meetings, whether it's through leading projects, whether it's through saying to your boss, like, hey, we do this external facing work with clients. Can I start to be on the stage to do that? And that's really, Sandy, how my professional speaking career kicked off. I think a lot of people think of professional speakers as, oh, they're the person that's on the keynote stage at the opening of a conference with the bright lights and the music. And absolutely. And yes, I'm putting it out in the world. That is what I aspire to do and be. Like, that is where I want to be. I want to be the main stage keynoter at the biggest conferences there are. And oftentimes for a professional speaker, it looks like facilitating a workshop in a room of 12 people. It looks like holding an intimate space for 8 members of a leadership team who are trying to get to know each other on a different level. And so I think there's so many ways that you can go be a public speaker. And right now, like, hello, social media, you just turn on your camera and speak. Now, to me, that doesn't make you a professional speaker unless you're making money doing it. But we won't go into that, Sandy. We're not going into that. um, but I think there's so many ways that you can have a platform. And Sandy, I consider you a professional speaker. You're out here using your spoken word to get your message across. It's driving business for you. So professional speaking is an element of your business. And there's no shortage of resources for anyone who's interested in becoming, learning about, developing skills as a speaker. I have been a member, I'm in the US, obviously, and I've been a member of the National Speakers Association for 6 years. And that has been an invaluable resource at both my local level and also the national level to learn from the best and also have an amazing peer set who's doing this crazy thing, earning a living with doing something that most people, it's their greatest fear.
Yeah, it is. And, I thank you for acknowledging me because I guess my doing this podcast and speaking more lately has been my version of letting her out. Um, growing up, I spent a lot of time on stages, performing choir and all the other stuff. And I always loved that. And I studied journalism in, high school and college and, would work in a setting where I could give facilitations and workshops and keynotes as well. And then I don't know what happened, Natalie. There was a phase where I just stopped doing it. And then I felt like I couldn't do it. And I just
Mm.
stopped. And it's so odd, and only in this past, year and a half have I reclaimed that and allowed myself to acknowledge, I really love doing this. Not just because it's definitely not because I like the sound of my voice. I just want to preface that. No one really does, right? But this ability for me to use a platform to amplify voices like yours and others, to share messages, to be a part of a solution in that way, to use my talents to be, and I truly find joy being able to do something like this. And I gave myself permission to relearn what I love and reclaim that. So I appreciate you in what you're doing. And you've been always an inspiration to me as well. Like I've seen you on stage and I'm like, oh man, I want to do what Natalie does.
Well, thank you. And I think you're actually raising a really important part that I want your listeners to lean into. So, you and I have worked together for almost 4 years. And granted, we've been on kind of opposite projects and sides of the world until right now. Like Sandy and I we are actively professionally speaking together as part of what we're doing right now in our work. So yay, high five through the screen to you on that one. But I wouldn't have known any of that about you, Sandy. And so I think a lot of times we show up in a new work environment and we get really pigeonholed in our role and people don't know these things about us because we don't ask. And we don't raise our hand and say, I can do that. And so I just have been unabashedly not shy and bold about telling every single boss I have ever worked for that I love being behind a microphone. And I just have grown to say, like, I'm really good at this. Like, it's a God-given gift that I have, and I've refined it over time because I've learned skills and the technology to make a really great virtual presentation and stagecraft. And it's all of the pieces of any type of job you're in, you're hopefully building your skills. And so if you're sitting here listening to this podcast saying, I have a dream, and maybe it's not public speaking, but maybe it's doing more artwork or graphics or marketing or fill in the blank, something that you've aspired to be, you got to speak up. You have to advocate for yourself because people aren't leaning in to be like, oh, well, maybe Sandy wants to present the next time. Like, I don't know. And so when we had a conversation at the end of last year, when you told me you wanted to do more of this, I'm like, game on, let's do it, sister. Like, I'll help you. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And that, goes back to what we were discussing before, right? Like you can rewrite your story. I was writing a story for myself that I was no longer good on stage or I didn't have those skills or I didn't want to do it. And the instant I changed that narrative for myself and what I projected outwardly, everything changed. Now I have 2 podcasts. Now I'm on more stages. I'm learning again and I'm enjoying it. And I'm working alongside you. And all of these opportunities, boom, 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 just came up just by the simple shift of perspective and story as we've been, reiterating over and over again.
And I think the other piece of this, Sandy, that I don't want to diminish is I think you also know what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people like, oh, I want to be a professional speaker, but they don't have a topic because they haven't found it yet. And I think for both you and I, we're so incredibly passionate about what we talk about that you could call me today and I could be ready by tonight to deliver a presentation on my topics because it's that in my bones
Yeah.
and it's that part of who I am. And so I think also if you're out there desiring this but don't know how to start, first by saying what is it that you talk about. And it's funny. I recently got a new computer, so I shifted everything over to the cloud. And in that, I did looked at my archive of all the presentations I've given since 2016, and it's remarkable. Like the body of work that I've developed is huge, and it's all mine. It's not something that I've copied and pasted and bought. It's my content, and I think you and I are both creators at heart, and so it's like lean into your creative ability. You will probably surprise yourself of what you can actually put out into the world.
That's so beautiful. And it brings up for me this question of, the big lie that I feel like I grew up with is that you find your purpose and then joy will come, right? So I went on this long journey of like, oh, I found a job that, and I found my purpose and, I was really good at it. So eventually I will feel joy, and I was chasing joy. And what is coming up for me as we speak about this, whether it's public speaking or whatever your natural inclinations are, it's like sink into your joy first and then your purpose will come. You're nodding your head. What's coming up for you as I
Oh,
say that?
absolutely. It has to be. And I think that I keep, a journal that's like moments of inspiration. And it's just those fleeting ideas that pop into my brain when I'm walking my dogs or in an endorphin high of a workout or in the shower, wherever they come. Because that's the joy. Like the joy hits you in moments when you don't expect it. Where I don't think any of us sit down like to look at the through line of joy in our day. Maybe you'll build a tool for us to do that. But I love that you say you have to lead with that first. And that goes back to this energy connection piece that we talked about earlier, is that when you're in the right energy, you can create and you can be and you are joy, right? But if you are putting on the armor and you're stuck in your negative brain and your survival mode, then you're not going to create, or what you do create is not going to resonate. I have so much stuff that I wrote from that place of armor that I've never put out into the world because I'm like, it won't serve anybody. It served me somehow getting it down, but it's not meant for public consumption. That's the stuff of my private diary.
That is amazing that you just shared that, because that's something that I speak about often on this podcast and, in my coaching, is just the scientific aspect of the joy frequency is that it's at its highest. It actually resonates even higher than love, right? Like love's at 500 megahertz and joy's at like 585. And so just without even knowing, when you're vibrating on that frequency, you are creating a contagion to others. That energy transfer, as you were saying, that's really powerful. It's why I think joy can be a superpower power if you choose it to be. Natalie, you are a mom of two daughters. What do you hope they learn from watching you lead, speak, write, and just, yeah.
I, my goal is that they never need to read my book for the lesson of let her out because I never want my daughters to keep her in. And I am doing my best as a mom to encourage the boldness, to encourage unapologetic leadership and uh, behaviors. I am teaching them to lean into their voice. My daughters are as different as they come, as I think most people with two children would probably say. And my oldest is very introspective. She's 15, very thoughtful. And this year she's in high school, and she said, how come the loudest voices are the ones, or the loudest voices tend to not have the best ideas, but they're the ones that get heard the most? And I said, welcome to the great leadership challenge of your life. And I said, "You're
Mhm.
going to have to learn how to have your voice heard in your own way because you're very thoughtful, you're very quiet." Her teachers often are surprised at how well she does because she's so quiet. And I'm thinking like, we got to break this stereotype that introverts can't be like the best badass people in the world. So for her, I want her to lean into her voice, but not in a way that's going to deplete her energy every single day. So we have lots of conversations about that. And I see her watching me build a business. I see her watching me build a
Mm.
movement, and she acknowledges it, which is lovely. Like she'll tell me in private or in letters, like just what she sees, and that like touches my heart, and I know she's watching. And for my youngest daughter, opposite end of the spectrum, like, she will tell it like it is to anybody in any level of leadership or authority. Her favorite, I do let her be on TikTok, and she has a private account, but she follows people in comments. And I just love it because she's just unabashed. She's not mean or anything. She'll just put it out there, and
Yes.
it's just, and she shares it with me, so it's great. But I'm trying my best to just have her stay that way because I feel like I see a lot of myself in her, and I see a lot of what she's doing now is what I shut down probably by the time I was in high school because it just got so tiring to try to be like, "Oh, come on." So I'm really, and granted, she has some EQ to build and that sort of thing, but that will come. That will come with time. In the meantime, I don't ever want her to feel like she has to quiet herself.
Oh, that's great. Um, and it's so refreshing to hear that you're allowing them to just be who they are, right? Not putting any kind of expectations
Yeah.
on them.
It's so true. We live in a very high achieving area of we live in a suburb of Columbus, so very competitive school. Kids who my daughter could graduate high school after sophomore year because that's how much advanced work she's done. And my husband's a college professor and administrator, so we have all the makings of like pushing a child to high achievement. And we've purposely said we don't
Mm.
want that for her. And we've already had to have those tough conversations, both her and teachers, of just like slow the roll and just take a deep breath. And getting an A- is not the end of the world. Getting a B+ is not the end of the world. Like you have your whole life to learn, and every time you don't achieve or you don't achieve to the level you think you're going to, that's a learning moment that will serve you much more down the road than bringing home a straight A+ grade card with all the stress and frenetic energy that would bring with it.
Yeah. We're just coming to the end of our time together, Natalie. We have about three more questions, but they're important ones. So I want to ask you, what brings you the most joy today? How do you intentionally cultivate joy in your life?
I think there are micro moments that bring me joy every day, and they are, I brought it with me, my cup of coffee that I have every day. I try to find a joyful moment, whether it's a conversation with a friend I'm having, whether they know I'm holding my coffee or not, if we're talking virtually, but just the simple pleasure of knowing that I can go to my kitchen and do this for myself and have the space in my day to do that. Those are types of things that bring me joy. I have three very large dogs, and they're all rescue dogs. And as much as they are a pain and they get me up at night, I do look at them and you just see like they just live in the moment. Talk
Mm.
about pure joy personified in a puppy. Like that's, to me, is just looking at them and seeing joy. And I find great joy in watching my daughters do what they do, whether it is them being on stage or being in an activity, or just simply sitting at the counter doing their homework. I just find there was a moment last week where all four of us were sitting at the kitchen counter. Both the girls were studying and doing homework. And I think I was on my laptop doing work, and I don't have, my husband was kind of floating in between with being the tutor to everybody. And I just remember I wrote that in my journal that night of like, this is the moment that I need to cherish because we were together, and it just,
Mhm.
we weren't on some tropical beach on a fancy vacation, which we love to do as well. But moment mattered. So I think through the work we have done at Positive Intelligence, and lean into, the small moments that bring the joy. Um, and of course, to our earlier conversation, being on stage and sharing a message that can benefit people is kind of the ultimate high as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Natalie, that you can cultivate joy, but you also need to acknowledge it when it's there and its natural moments. So, if listeners could take away one step today towards reclaiming their authentic selves? What should it be? What's that one small step?
I want the one small step for them to be, how can you find the way to remember who you were way back then? So that's going to find whatever archival uh, piece of information will help you with that. It's your journal diary, a picture, a yearbook. Even if you don't have any of that stuff, looking at a movie or TV show from the time that you want to remember, I would love everyone to walk away and just say, you know what? If I look at this one picture, if I read this one passage I wrote, that will always reconnect me to who I am and my higher purpose.
Wow. Natalie, thank you so much for this. If our listeners want to learn more about you, your work, where do they find you? What's coming up for Natalie?
It's very easy to find me because I am the only Natalie Siston, Siston. There's a Siston and a Sisto. We know each other. It's crazy. You find each other when you have these names, but I'm the only one. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. And if you're interested in diving more into Let Her Out, go to letherout.com and find out how you can get the book and all of the resources that I've developed to support the reading journey.
Thank you so much. This conversation has been a beautiful journey with you. It's been full of wisdom, warmth, and inspiration. I'm so excited for the listeners to get to know you better. Please get your copy of Let Her Out and be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple iTunes. Bye, everyone. Thank you.